Madison stood in front of the mirror, her heart racing. She took a deep breath, but the words wouldn't come out right. Why did English sound so smooth in her head, but so different when she spoke? Welcome to the Fluent Storybook. Here, we bring you exciting stories that help you learn English in a fun and natural way. If you want to speak clearly and confidently, this story will show you how. Madison had always admired the way some people spoke English so effortlessly. She would sit in class and listen to students who seemed to have no fear, speaking in clear, confident voices. Their words flowed smoothly, their pronunciation was perfect, and they never hesitated or stumbled. Madison, on the other hand, felt like her tongue turned heavy whenever she had to speak in English. It wasn't that she didn't know the words, she did. She had spent hours studying grammar, memorizing vocabulary, and listening to English conversations. But when it came time to open her mouth and actually speak, something always went wrong. It started with the fear. The moment her teacher called on her in class, Madison's heart would pound so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands would feel ice cold, and her throat would go dry. She would try to form the words in her mind, but by the time they reached her lips, they sounded different, broken, unsure, weak. Sometimes, she would mispronounce a word and immediately hear a quiet giggle from the back of the classroom. Other times, she would freeze, unable to say anything at all, and the teacher would move on to the next student. That was the worst feeling, being invisible, knowing that she had something to say, but being too scared to say it. One particular day, the teacher had assigned a reading activity. Each student had to stand up and read a paragraph from their textbook. Madison knew her turn was coming, and the anxiety built up inside her like a wave about to crash. She traced the words in her book with her finger, trying to prepare herself. Just read it normally, she told herself. You can do this. But when the teacher finally said her name, her mind went blank. She stood up, holding the book tightly, and began to read. Her voice came out shaky. The first sentence was okay, but by the second sentence, she stumbled on a word. She quickly corrected herself, but she could feel the heat rising to her face. Then she mispronounced another word, and she heard a soft chuckle from the row behind her. Madison's stomach tightened. She forced herself to keep reading, but the more she focused on trying to sound perfect, the worse it got. Her words came out in a rush, some syllables missing, her voice quieter and quieter. By the time she finished, she was practically whispering. She sat down, her hands gripping the edges of her desk. She couldn't look up. Her teacher moved on to the next student, but Madison barely heard anything. Her mind was stuck on what had just happened. Why can't I do this? She thought bitterly. I know English. I understand everything. But when I speak, it's like I forget how. The rest of the day felt heavy. Even when she walked home, the embarrassment still clung to her. She kept replaying the moment in her mind. Her shaky voice, the laughter, the way her heart had pounded so hard it felt like the entire classroom could hear it. When she got home, she went straight to her room and sat on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Maybe I'll never be good at this, she thought. Maybe I should just stop trying. But a small voice in the back of her mind refused to accept that. It reminded her of the students who spoke confidently, the ones who weren't afraid to make mistakes. She wondered if they had always been that way, or if they had struggled too. Madison wanted to believe that confidence wasn't something you were just born with. It was something you could build. She sat up and grabbed her phone. If she was ever going to improve, she needed to do something different. She couldn't just keep hoping that one day she would magically wake up and speak perfectly. She had to take action. But where could she start? Speaking in class made her nervous, and practicing with other people felt even scarier. She needed a safe space, somewhere she could make mistakes without fear. And that's when an idea came to her. What if she started practicing alone? She looked around her room. There was no one here to judge her, no one to laugh at her mistakes. If she spoke English by herself, she could take her time. She could repeat words over and over until they sounded right. She could practice at her own pace. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Madison stood up and walked to the mirror. She hesitated for a moment, feeling a little silly. Then, she took a deep breath and said the first English sentence that came to her mind. Her voice was quiet at first, but for the first time, there was no fear. She was ready to try. Madison stood in front of the mirror, staring at her own reflection. She could see the nervousness in her eyes, but there was something else too, a tiny spark of determination. Speaking English in front of people scared her, but right now, in the safety of her own room, there was no one to judge her. She could take her time, make mistakes, and correct herself without feeling embarrassed. She cleared her throat. "Hello," she said softly. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. It wasn't as smooth as she wanted it to be, and she could hear the hesitation in her tone. But at least she had spoken. That was a start. She tried again. "Hello, my name is Madison." This time, her voice was a little stronger. She repeated the sentence a few more times, each time making small adjustments. She paid attention to how her mouth moved when she spoke, how certain words felt when she said them out loud. She had never really thought about this before, how speaking was more than just knowing words. It was about how those words came out, how her lips and tongue moved, how confident she sounded. But confidence didn't come easily. As she practiced, she found herself slipping back into self-doubt. Was she pronouncing everything correctly? Did she sound weird? Would someone laugh if they heard her? She shook her head, trying to push those thoughts away. No one was watching her right now. This was her time to improve, to make things feel more natural. She decided to pretend she was talking to someone. She imagined a conversation. "Hi, how are you?" she said, looking at herself in the mirror. She waited a moment, then answered her own question. "I'm good. Thanks for asking." She laughed a little at how silly it felt, but at the same time, it was helping. The words were coming out smoother. She kept going, pretending to introduce herself to a new friend. "My name is Madison. I am a student. I like reading and listening to music." The more she practiced, the more comfortable she felt. She started experimenting with different sentences, trying to speak without thinking too much. Then, she made a mistake. She tried to say, "I enjoy watching movies," but it came out wrong. She stumbled over the word watching and suddenly felt frustrated. The old feelings of failure started creeping in, but this time, she stopped herself from giving up. Instead of feeling embarrassed, she repeated the sentence slowly. "I enjoy watching movies." She focused on the word she had struggled with. Watch ing. Watching. Watching. She said it again and again until it started to feel natural. That was when she realized something important. Mistakes weren't the enemy. In school, whenever she made a mistake while speaking, she felt ashamed. But now, in her room, she could make as many mistakes as she wanted, and no one would judge her. She had the power to fix them, to learn from them. This thought gave her confidence. She practiced for the next hour, repeating sentences, working on difficult words, and even trying to tell short stories in English. It was exhausting, but for the first time, she felt like she was making real progress. By the end of the night, Madison sat on her bed, feeling proud of herself. She wasn't perfect yet, but she had taken a big step forward. Speaking alone in her room wasn't the same as speaking in front of people, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, she believed that she could get better. But deep down, she knew that speaking alone would only take her so far. If she wanted to be truly confident, she needed to take the next step. She needed to practice with someone else. The next morning, Madison sat at her desk, staring at her notebook. The pages were filled with English words and phrases she had practiced the night before. She had spent hours speaking to herself, repeating sentences over and over, fixing her mistakes, and pushing herself to sound more natural. It had felt good, safe even, but now she faced a new challenge. Practicing alone was one thing. Speaking to someone else was another. Her heart pounded as she thought about it. What if she made mistakes? What if the other person didn't understand her? What if they laughed? The thought of talking to someone in English made her stomach twist in knots. But Madison also knew one thing. She wanted to be better. She wanted to speak clearly and confidently, not just in front of a mirror, but in real conversations. And the only way to do that was to start speaking with someone else. But who? She didn't have any close friends who spoke fluent English. At school, she avoided speaking in English unless it was absolutely necessary. There were kids who were much better than her, kids who could speak easily, without hesitation. Talking to them felt impossible. She sighed, flipping through her notebook. Then, she remembered something her teacher had once said. If you want to improve, don't be afraid to ask for help. Madison hesitated, then picked up her phone. Maybe there was someone she could practice with, someone who wouldn't judge her, someone she felt comfortable with. She thought about her cousin, Ava. Ava had moved to another state a few years ago, but they still talk sometimes. She was fluent in English, always chatting easily, making jokes, and never struggling to find the right words. More importantly, Ava was kind. She wouldn't laugh at Madison. Madison took a deep breath and typed a message. "Hey Ava, I was wondering, could we talk in English next time we call? I really want to practice." Her fingers hovered over the send button. What if Ava thought it was weird? What if she said no? Before she could overthink it, she pressed send. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed. It was Ava. Of course. That sounds fun. We can call later today. Madison's stomach flipped. It was really happening. That evening, Madison sat on her bed, holding her phone tightly. Ava's name was on the screen, waiting for her to press the call button. She swallowed hard. What if I mess up? She whispered to herself. Then she remembered last night, how she had made mistakes but kept going, how practicing alone had made her feel stronger. This was just the next step. She had to try. She took a deep breath and tapped the call button. After a few rings, Ava answered. "Hey, Madison." Madison hesitated for a second, then forced herself to respond. "Hi, Ava. How are you?" Her voice shook slightly, but she had done it. She had spoken first. "I'm good. How about you?" I'm good too." Madison bit her lip. She could hear her own hesitation, the small gaps between her words, but Ava didn't seem to mind. They kept talking, and Madison quickly realized something. Ava was patient. She didn't rush her or interrupt when Madison took a moment to find the right words. Instead, she encouraged her. When Madison struggled with a sentence, Ava gently helped. "You mean, I went to the store yesterday, not I go to the store yesterday," Ava corrected with a smile in her voice. Madison nodded, repeating it. "I went to the store yesterday." "Perfect. See? You got this." The conversation lasted longer than Madison had expected. At first, she stuck to simple sentences, answering Ava's questions with short replies. But as the minutes passed, she started feeling a little braver. She added more details to her answers, asked her own questions, and even laughed when Ava made a joke. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. By the time they hung up, Madison felt a mix of relief and excitement. She had done it. She had spoken in English for an entire conversation. And most importantly, she hadn't given up. But deep down, she knew she couldn't stop here. Talking to Ava had been a huge step, but if she really wanted to improve, she needed to find more ways to practice. She needed to talk to more people. She needed to bring English into her daily life. Madison lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying her conversation with Ava over and over in her mind. It had been a small step, but it had felt like a big achievement. She had spoken English with another person, and even though she had made mistakes, she had kept going. She had survived. But there was something that still bothered her. She spoke too fast. During the conversation, whenever she had felt nervous or unsure, she had rushed through her words, hoping to get them out before she lost confidence. The faster she spoke, the more mistakes she made. Sometimes her words had come out jumbled. Other times, Ava had asked her to repeat herself because she hadn't understood what Madison was saying. It made Madison feel frustrated. "I thought I was getting better," she whispered to herself. "But if people can't understand me, what's the point?" She grabbed her notebook and flipped to a fresh page. At the top, she wrote, "How can I speak more clearly?" She started listing her problems. 1. I speak too fast. 2. I mumble when I'm nervous. 3. I forget to pause between sentences. 4. My pronunciation is not always clear. She stared at the list, feeling overwhelmed. But then, she remembered something important. Every problem had a solution. She just had to find it. And the first step was to slow down. The next morning, Madison decided to test something. She stood in front of her mirror, took a deep breath, and said a simple sentence out loud. "I want to learn English." She had said it the way she usually did, fast, without much thought. It sounded rushed, like she was trying to get the words out as quickly as possible. She frowned. Then she tried again. This time, she spoke slowly. She separated each word clearly and made sure to pronounce each sound. "I want to learn English." It sounded different. Better. She tried another sentence. Speaking slowly makes me sound more confident. She said it once quickly, then again slowly. The second time it sounded clearer. More natural. A thought popped into her head. Maybe speaking slower didn't just make her sound clearer. It made her sound more confident. She grabbed her notebook again and wrote. Slow speaking equals clear speaking equals confident speaking. She decided to put this idea into action. At school, Madison sat in English class, her heart pounding. The teacher had asked a question, and Madison knew the answer. Normally, she would have avoided speaking up, afraid that her words would come out wrong. But today, she had a plan. Slow down. She raised her hand. The teacher called on her. Madison swallowed her nerves and spoke. The main character in the story learned a lesson about friendship. She made sure to pause after each phrase. She didn't rush. She didn't mumble. And to her surprise, the teacher smiled and nodded. Great answer, Madison. Madison exhaled. That had felt good. That evening, Madison called Ava again. This time, she had a new goal. Speak slowly and clearly. When Ava answered, Madison focused on her words. Instead of saying, "Hey, how are you?" all in one breath, she said, "Hey, how are you?" Ava responded, and they started chatting. Madison kept reminding herself, slow down. Take your time. At one point, she said, I had a busy day at school, but I feel happy because I learned something new. Ava laughed. Wow, you sound really confident today. I can actually hear every word you're saying. Madison grinned. It was working. A few days later, Madison found herself at a coffee shop with her mom. She wanted to order by herself, but the thought of speaking to the cashier made her nervous. She almost backed out. But then she remembered, slow down. Speak clearly. You can do this. She took a deep breath, walked up to the counter, and said, Hi, can I have a caramel latte, please? The cashier smiled. Sure. What size? Madison replied, medium, please. And just like that, she had done it. She had spoken English to a stranger, and she had been understood. As she took her coffee and walked back to her seat, her heart swelled with pride. She was becoming confident. She was learning to speak clearly, and she wasn't stopping now. Madison sat at her desk, tapping her pencil against her notebook. She could hear the teacher at the front of the classroom explaining their next assignment, but her mind was somewhere else. She had come so far in her journey to speak English clearly. She had practiced speaking slowly in front of the mirror. She had tested her skills in small conversations with Ava, and she had even ordered coffee by herself. Each step had made her a little more confident. But now, she was about to face her biggest challenge yet. All right, class, the teacher said, clapping her hands together. For our next assignment, you will each give a short speech in front of the class. You can choose any topic, but I want you to prepare a speech that is at least 2 minutes long. Madison's heart stopped. A speech? In front of everyone? She felt a wave of panic rise in her chest. Speaking to one person was hard enough. How was she supposed to stand up in front of the whole class and speak in English? She glanced around the room. Some students looked excited. Others looked as nervous as she felt. But all she could think about was how badly this could go. What if she forgot her words? What if she spoke too fast and no one understood her? What if everyone laughed at her mistakes? She felt her hands start to shake. Then, she took a deep breath. She had worked too hard to let fear stop her now. That evening, Madison sat at her desk, staring at a blank page. She thought about choosing an easy topic, something she could memorize without thinking too much. But then, she remembered what her goal really was. She didn't just want to get through the speech. She wanted to prove to herself that she could speak English with confidence. Then an idea came to her. She would talk about her own journey, her journey of learning to speak English confidently. It was something she knew better than anything else. And if she got nervous, she could just remind herself that she was telling her own story. She grabbed her notebook and started writing. For the next few days, Madison practiced her speech everywhere. She practiced in front of the mirror. She focused on speaking slowly, making eye contact with herself, and using hand gestures to make her words feel natural. She practiced with Ava. Ava listened patiently and cheered her on. You're doing amazing, Madison. You sound so clear and confident. She even practiced with her mom. At first, she was embarrassed, but her mom's encouragement helped her feel more at ease. She wrote key points on flashcards, memorized the main ideas, and even recorded herself speaking so she could listen and improve. Little by little, she started to feel ready. But there was still one thing she couldn't control: her fear of speaking in front of so many people. The day of the speech arrived. Madison walked into the classroom, her heart racing. She had barely touched her breakfast that morning. She had practiced her speech over and over, but now, as she sat in her seat, all the words seemed to disappear from her mind. One by one, students went to the front of the class to give their speeches. Some spoke confidently, while others stumbled over their words. Madison's palms were sweaty as she waited for her turn. Then, the teacher called her name. This was it. She stood up, took a deep breath, and walked to the front of the class. She could feel everyone's eyes on her. Her hands were shaking, but she reminded herself of everything she had learned. Speak slowly. Make eye contact. Breathe. She took one more deep breath, looked at her classmates, and began. A few months ago, I was afraid to speak English. Her voice was steady. She focused on speaking slowly, just like she had practiced. I was scared of making mistakes. I was scared of people laughing at me. So, I stayed quiet. She saw a few students nodding, as if they understood. But then I started practicing. First alone, then with my best friend. I learned to slow down. I learned to be patient with myself. She paused for a moment. No one was laughing. Everyone was listening. A surge of confidence rushed through her. And today, I am standing here speaking in front of all of you. I am still learning, but I am not afraid anymore. She finished her speech and looked at the class. For a moment, there was silence. Then applause. Madison felt like she was floating as she walked back to her seat. She had done it. She had spoken in front of the whole class. And it hadn't been perfect. She had stumbled over a few words. She had paused longer than she meant to. But that didn't matter, because she had spoken clearly. She had spoken confidently. And for the first time in her life, she felt proud of her English. That evening, Madison sat at her desk again, looking at the same notebook where she had written down her fears. She turned to a fresh page and wrote, I did it. She had started this journey afraid to speak, afraid of mistakes, afraid of what people might think. Now, she had spoken in front of an entire classroom. She smiled to herself. This was just the beginning, because now she knew she could do it, and nothing was going to stop her. Conclusion. Madison's journey was not just about learning English. It was about overcoming fear, building confidence, and believing in herself. She started with hesitation, afraid of speaking even a single word in front of others. But through small, consistent efforts, she changed, from practicing alone in her room to finding a speaking partner, from learning to slow down her words to standing in front of the entire class. Each step built her confidence. Now, let's look at the biggest lessons from her journey. Fear is normal, but it shouldn't stop you. In the beginning, Madison feared speaking. She worried about making mistakes, about people laughing at her, about not being perfect. And isn't that the same fear many of us feel? Whenever we try something new, especially speaking a language that is not our first, fear shows up. It whispers, what if I say the wrong word? What if I sound silly? What if people don't understand me? But the truth is, everyone makes mistakes. Even native English speakers sometimes say the wrong word or forget what they were about to say. Madison's biggest change came when she stopped letting fear control her actions. She realized that fear would always be there, but she didn't have to listen to it. And that's an important lesson for all of us. Fear is normal, but it shouldn't stop you from speaking. Start small, but start today. One of the biggest reasons people struggle with speaking English is waiting for the perfect moment. They think, I will speak when I feel ready. But the truth is, you will never feel ready if you don't start. Madison didn't wake up one day suddenly confident in English. She started with small steps, talking to herself in her room, speaking 1 or 2 sentences with Ava, practicing her pronunciation alone. These small actions built her confidence over time. And you can do the same. If speaking English feels scary, start small. Talk to yourself in the mirror. Read a book aloud. Order food in English instead of pointing at the menu. Say hello to someone in English. Small steps may feel simple, but they create huge progress. You don't have to be perfect to start. You just have to start. 2. Practice makes you confident, not perfect. Many people think confidence comes from knowing everything. But the truth is, confidence comes from practice. Madison wasn't confident in the beginning, but the more she practiced, the more she started believing in herself. She learned that speaking every day, even in small ways, helped her feel more comfortable with English. The more you practice, the less nervous you feel. And with time, you realize you don't need to be perfect to be confident. You just need to try. 3. Find someone who supports you. Madison's journey became easier and more fun when she started practicing with Ava. Speaking alone helped her, but speaking with a friend gave her encouragement. Ava reminded her that she was improving. A safe space. She could make mistakes without feeling embarrassed. A real conversation. She could practice responding naturally. If you want to improve your English, find a speaking partner. It could be a friend, a family member, or even an online language partner. Having someone to practice with makes a huge difference. Speaking with others helps you grow faster than practicing alone. 4. Slowing down helps you speak clearly. One of Madison's biggest breakthroughs was learning to slow down. She used to rush through her sentences because she was nervous. But when she slowed down, she pronounced words better. She felt more in control. People understood her more easily. Many English learners think speaking fast makes them sound fluent. But the truth is, clear speech is better than fast speech. Take your time. Pause when needed. Focus on saying each word clearly. When you slow down, you sound more confident. 5. The more you speak, the easier it gets. At the beginning of Madison's journey, even one sentence in English felt hard. But by the end, she stood in front of her class and gave an entire speech. What changed? She kept speaking even when it was hard. Speaking is like exercising a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. If you practice speaking English every day, even for just 5 minutes, you will see a huge improvement. The hardest part is starting, but once you start, it gets easier. 6. Success is not about being perfect. It's about moving forward. When Madison finished her speech, she wasn't perfect. She made a few mistakes. She paused too long. She forgot a word. But guess what? No one cared. What mattered was that she had the courage to speak. And that's the most important lesson of all. Success is not about speaking without mistakes. Success is having the confidence to speak despite mistakes. Don't wait to be perfect. Start now, and you will improve along the way. Madison's journey doesn't end with her speech. She will keep practicing. She will keep improving. And with time, speaking English will feel as natural as breathing. And the same can happen for you. Wherever you are in your English journey, remember, you are not alone. Many people struggle with speaking. Fear is normal. Don't let it stop you. Small steps lead to big progress. Speaking clearly is better than speaking fast. Mistakes don't matter. What matters is trying. Your journey starts today. So take a deep breath, say a sentence out loud, and keep moving forward. Because you can speak English clearly and confidently.